Ringing hero simps, virgins, peasants, and incels.
Very inclusive.
And welcome back to Krown's magical but also extremely serious magic internet money game, no laughs allowed.
You sound like an air hostess or something. Welcome back to the Krown Crypto channel. It is a lovely Saturday morning over here from Helsinki, Finland. It is absolutely white outside, not in terms of ethnicity, but in terms of actual environment. Like it's so snowy that you can't see anything but white outside of this window right now. Anyways, you don't give a fuck about that. You give a fuck about what we're about to hopefully talk about today, if I can even talk properly, which is Bitcoin price action, of which a few very interesting things on the weekly going on that CME closed yesterday, that it gives us a few things to be looking forward for the next couple weeks to come. And then of course, a insight into the weekend ranges. Very, very fun time as usual, as Bitcoin's bound between, very short boundaries right now. Anyways, with that in mind, I should also let you know that Apex has fully integrated into Bybit, meaning that if you're looking for a decentralized exchange, which essentially is an alternative to a regular centralized exchange, for the people who are probably most worried about running into an FTX-like situation, this might be a good, viable alternative to be looking into, because essentially it allows you to trade directly from your wallet, meaning that you don't have to trust an exchange to actually hold your coins on there. Anyways, there is a link to that in the description below, but it's time to actually get into the price action instead of be shilling, and let's start it off right over here with weekly volatility for CME upon the closure yesterday for Friday. So wrapping up the week, we do again look at extreme lows on weekly volatility here. Levels that we really haven't seen. We've really only seen a few times in CME's history. Now, keep in mind, CME's only been around for about going on 5 years now. But ultimately, you can see that the levels that we're looking at are comparable to what we saw in basically this year, March, April of 2022. And then other than that, the only time that we've seen, this sort of levels is October 2020 and July 2020. These were humongous, setting up for humongous moves over here coming out of the last major bear market before Bitcoin went from 10,000 basically to 60 to 70,000 bucks. And then more recently, we saw these extreme low volatility reads when Bitcoin put in the actual bull trap right here, at least in my opinion, on the weekly, before coming down about 70% from those $50,000 highs or so. Anyways, with that said, that low volatility, which very likely does imply that we're going to be looking at a macro move again to the upside. The last time we saw this happen was 600% to the upside, and to the downside, as you just saw, 70% to the downside. Well, we can start to look at momentum also as to get a bias on direction here, of which CME has continued to confirm the bullish divergence coming on the weekly as of yesterday's closure. So I still do have an overall upside bias as far as Bitcoin trying higher before potentially going lower later. Again, I stick by what I've been saying, in the sense that if Bitcoin is going to go lower than where it than its current lows, it likely happens, around end of Q1 2023, maybe Q2 of 2023, if it's going to happen at all. In the short term, the relative short term, the next few months, I still do think that Bitcoin's a lot more poised to try some upside from here. And of course, that the sort of key consideration there is that no closing lower lows. So that does allow for Bitcoin to retest current lows if it wants to. If that's going to happen, it would probably happen next week, but I do think that Bitcoin is more or less poised for a continuation of this rally. Anyways, in this case, it should also be known that the weekly jewel is going to be swinging around for likely a pretty damn good signal here. Now, this is going to take some time, obviously. Could happen as soon as late December, but if that happens, that'd be the next sort of major sort of block in the long-term castle that this is building, if that analogy even makes sense, pointed towards, a greater rally into the shallow, maybe even medium $20,000 territory, kind of to wrap up this year and head into early next year. Anyways, moving on from there, I should also be aware that the 5-day stochastic oscillator is not closing today, but it is closing tomorrow. And seeing the way that CME already closed the weekly, we can get a pretty strong idea of where spot price action is likely to close this week out as well, which is going to also be the 5-day closure, which again is tomorrow. CME closed above 17,000 bucks, a hair above 17,000 bucks, but it is there nonetheless. And on the 5-day chart right here, you can see that the current pivot is significantly lower than that at 16,400 and change. So ultimately, a lot of things can happen as soon as tomorrow that, again, really does give a nice bias coming into the next month and a half. And so one would be the 5-day stochastic also actually officially turning up for the first time since October. And October was the October rally over here, where Bitcoin went from like 18,000 bucks to 21,500 bucks. And that was, obviously a more muted one on this particular one. But of course, even if we go back to the one before that, that was your July rally when Bitcoin went from like 18 to 25 and so on and so forth. And we can actually even pull one even much further back than that in January. And that was, of course, that last major bull trap on the higher term timeframes when Bitcoin went from about 36,000 bucks to nearly 50,000 bucks over here. Anyways, in this case, you'll see it cross up for the first time in a very long time. It'll also be playing out a trend line regression test over here, as you can see, fitting all of those last major lows that I just kind of outlined right there. As you know, however, those were major lows, not macro lows, fucking obviously, right? Because Bitcoin did eventually come down further, but the bounce has been getting less and less. So the question is, does that relationship continue or not? So in the short term, that would still, again, imply that this bounce very likely does continue. The real question is, does Bitcoin get above any sort of important macro long-term areas, which at minimum would be that last major rejective high that we did see at about 21,500 bucks. That was in late October, early November. Anyways, so that's it for the higher term time frames right here. That's what I'm kind of looking for in the next day and a half, I guess. Now we can get into the lower term time frames. Of which I think it'd just be best to look at the HPDR indicator over here. So the HPDR indicator on Wednesday/Thursday was giving us a bias for a major upside move, a nice like 3 to 4% upside move. We've gotten that 3 to 4% upside move already, I believe. Yeah, coming in from this low right here to our current high. Yeah, there's 4% right there. Not bad. That was right bang on with the statistics for that one within that time frame as well. It doesn't mean it always works like that, but in this case, more often than not, it will. And in this case, what can we see on the 4-hour time frame? Well, the 4-hour time frame does represent the medium-term time frame range here. And of course, to the upside, 17,700 is still going to be that major area, at least for me. As long as Bitcoin is below 17,700, it's not wise to be looking for that greater leap up into the mid 18s. But that also does imply that above 17,700, that's where things start to change. And I do look for that next, almost $1,000 move into the mid 18s, maybe even more than that. Again, it's going to have downstream effects into the higher term timeframes that we just looked at earlier. By the same token, I am more or less bullish. I am more or less looking for a continuation on this rally as long as Bitcoin remains above the bottom side of the 4-hour 50% range. So that would be 16,700. Basically, I think this was Thursday's low. Yeah, that was Thursday's low right there. A little bit lower than that, but 16,700 would be good enough for me. Any sort of a move back down below that region, very likely Bitcoin's going to undo this whole rally. You're going to see a whole return back down below 16,000 bucks, probably somewhere between 15,500 to 16,000 bucks. So again, if I'm just going to say like a one sentence takeaway, above 16,007 or 16,000 even 750, I'd say generally good. Continues to very likely rally to the upside in the short term, maybe as much as 17,700. That's sort of the next big test as far as I'm concerned with. As far as the weekend goes, however, as you typically know, weekend is marked by low volatility and very fucking tight ranges, which makes it incredibly fun for sandpaper enjoyers. Anyways, if we can load this damn chart, that would be great. Let me just give it 1 second. We have like a million calculators in the background who are like, what's the ranges right now? What's going on? But there we go. Looks like the little elves are done. And on the short term, hourly HPDR range, 50% is what I'm focusing on right here. We can see a range between about 16,950 to the downside versus 17,370 to the upside. So it's basically the high of what we've seen on this rally thus far versus basically kind of around those lows. I would even go as far to say that 17,000 bucks is kind of that major pivot in the sand for the hourly. Below 17, very likely going to test 16.7. Below 16.7, that's where I switch on from short-term, medium-term bullish to short-term, medium-term, looking for another maybe even $1,000 move to the downside into the mid-15s, upper 15s, something like that. But again, that would still not imply new lows. The only thing that would imply new lows, honestly, closing on new lows at this point. I'm pretty. I do feel. Not that feelings are a good thing to be going off of, but I do suspect that Bitcoin again very likely does try higher before potentially going lower later. Anyways, I think that's probably enough for today's video. I figure it's better to keep it a bit more light on the weekends because, well, things are usually rather boring. Tomorrow we'll do a more macro-infused look on Bitcoin. There are a few new things to be aware of there that do influence the very long-term picture, as well as Swanee's analysis to check out as well. By the way, great video with him yesterday that we did on this channel. He has a very unique look on price action, if I haven't already said it, and very much interesting, especially for people who are looking for a little bit more of the hopium, but supported by, some pretty compelling evidence. Anyways, yes, that's a good place for me to be leaving things off. I'm going to be heading out now. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.